Solving the New Orleans Saints quarterback issue is not easy, ladies and gentlemen, but today we're going to try and do that exact thing. We're going to try and talk about what the possibilities, the options, all of that are for the Saints when it comes to the QB position. This is an absolute puzzle. It's an absolute Rubik's Cube. Now, the backdrop for that conversation is Ross Jackson, Locked On Saints. I think he's going to be talking a little bit about that, and we will use that as a launching pad, if you will, for our discussion.
Podcast Network, your team every day. If the New Orleans Saints do move on from a veteran quarterback in Derek Carr, giving Spencer Rattler a shot in 2025 makes sense.
Okay, so let's really lay the foundation for what is going to happen here, or what could happen, or the possibilities, or whatever. Right now, the Saints have Derek Carr. So with Derek Carr, what are the options? One, do nothing. One option is to do absolutely nothing, play Derek Carr, see what he's got, see what the team can do, whatever. Next option, restructure Derek Carr. More than likely, if they're going to keep him, they're going to restructure him. Now, Carr said he won't take a pay cut, but restructuring a pay cut isn't exactly synonymous. But restructure Derek Carr, which would then lead the Saints to keeping Derek Carr. Okay, so keep, do nothing, keep, restructure, trade. This one gets a little tricky. Carr would have to be amiable to that. You'd have to find a dancing partner. Takes two to tango. So the trade is a little wonky, but a trade you could figure out the cap a little bit. You could get Carr out of there. You could also get some assets. Maybe the least likely to happen, but still a possibility. You could cut Carr. Now you can cut him two different ways. You can cut him a pre-June 1 or post-June 1, or designate post-June 1, however you want to phrase it. Again, this is all financial. If you do it, and I'm doing this back in napkin math, so somebody check me in the comments. I'm sure they will. If you do it post June 1, you can spread out the hit over another couple of years, or another year, however you want to do it. If you do it beforehand, then you just eat it. Like you just take it to the absolute face over the course of 2 years, and it is what it is. So that's Carr, okay? Take Carr out of the equation now. Pretend that he's off the team. Now your options are rock and roll with Spencer Rattler. Okay. Draft a quarterback. Okay. We'll go over some draft prospects. Sign/trade for a quarterback. Okay. And that really is what got my wheels turning. Because I was thinking, I was like, who makes sense for the Saints? Who kind of checks some boxes? And I'll tell you someone I was very interested in, and that's Justin Fields. And when you think about Justin Fields, there's obvious parallels to Jalen Hurts. Justin Fields is 25 years old, seemingly could kind of fit into what Kellen Moore would want to do. Justin Fields has shown signs of being really good at points. So Fields is interesting. The problem with Fields is you're almost like a year too late, right? Last year, he was playing the last year of his rookie contract. Now he's a free agent. That's bad news Bears, because you're not going to get Justin Fields on a 1 year, $5 million deal. You're not going to get Justin Fields on a 3 year, $16, $17 million deal. He is going to be asking big money. I mean, if you look at players like Sam Darnold, I have the quarterback contracts pulled up here. So if you look at quarterbacks like Sam Darnold, okay, so Sam Darnold goes to the Vikings, I believe, on a 1 year deal. He was paid somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 million, okay? So I would think Justin Fields in a competitive free agent market, that's another negative to this, is that he's a free agent. So you're going to be competing with the Steelers. You'll be competing with everyone with Justin Fields. I would guess he's probably going to be in the neighborhood of that $15 million, $20 million a year world. I mean, I think Gardner Minshew made $19 million or something. So the quarterback market is higher than you think it is. Justin Fields for 2 years or 3 years, $50 million, or 2 years, $45 million, or something like that, doesn't sound as appealing. Doesn't sound as much of okay, we could take this gamble, right? So a lot of moving and shaking. Let's say you do go get Fields. More than likely, you're going to have to get a veteran backup. So now you're talking about, okay, you get Fields, you keep Rattler, You let Jake Haener go sell candy pecans in the 9th row, and then what? You sign a Cooper Rush for another $5 million? Now all of a sudden it's like, damn, maybe it was cheaper just to keep Carr. All right, so very, very, very tricky situation when it comes to the Saints quarterback conundrum.
But he wouldn't be the only one in the conversation. So let me start off with why I think Spencer Rattler would deserve the shot. Look, he started, 6 games last year, all 6 of those games.
Let me make this really clear. He does not deserve anything. This coaching staff, this whatever, has zero commitment to Spencer Rattler. They have zero investment in Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler was a 5th-round pick from the previous regime. These guys coming in know nothing about Spencer Rattler. They know him just as much as they know about Jake Haener and just as much as they know about Derek Carr. So zero any of the anything from last year where you're like, well, I mean, Spencer Rattler got a raw deal. I would like to see him with this. I would like to see him with that. We're saying that because we sat there and watched it every week. Kellen Moore probably isn't saying that. His staff probably isn't saying that. So you also got to kind of shift how you view this and how you view how the coaching staff may view Spencer Rattler.
Were losses. And, we can do the injury thing and say that he never had Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Alvin Kamara all healthy, all in one game and all those other things. Didn't have Eric McCoy for certain games and stuff like that. But I'm going to leave that to the side because if we're not going to make injury excuses for one quarterback, we shouldn't make injury excuses for another quarterback. And remember, my my understanding of the idea of moving on from Derek Carr doesn't really have anything to do with Derek Carr's performance, right?
Yeah, so let me make this clear. The Derek Carr, his whole situation is nothing to do with results. Nothing to do with touchdown interception ratio or QBR or wins or fourth quarter comebacks or historical stats or compilations or whatever Darren Carr's tweeting. It has nothing to do with that. It's strictly to do with what is the most advantageous financial decision the Saints can make that is alongside their plan for the next 3 years, the next 3 to 5 years. There has to be a philosophy and there has to be a plan for this pseudo rebuild. We are not in the market of what gives us the best chance to win next year. That is not the thought process. That's not the philosophy. Derek Carr obviously gives them the best chance to win out of Spencer Rattler, Jake Haener, or Cooper Rush, or whatever we're talking about. But what gets them closer to their goal in 3 years, which is getting younger, getting cheaper, and rebuilding the foundation of this team. Okay? Maximum, Derek Carr is here for 2 years if you keep him on the entire contract, the next 2 seasons. All right? And then, poof, he's gone. That doesn't really line up with what we're trying to do. Now, if at the end of the day, they decide financially it makes sense to keep Carr, or it's all just kind of the same, but you may save a couple million here, save a couple million there, that is going to drive the decision. So if you're looking through this and through the window of, and that's the same thing with Spencer Rattler. It doesn't matter if Spencer Rattler had 4 touchdowns and 5 picks. It doesn't matter if Spencer Rattler went 0-7. Kellen Moore and this entire new staff don't care about that. They care about what he can physically do, what his physical traits are, and how his contract and his window lines up with the Saints' philosophy and their philosophy going into the next couple of years.
Doesn't really have anything to do with how he is as a quarterback, how he performed as a quarterback. It's just, where do you want to invest your time? If I'm a head coach, I want to invest my time on the guys that can be my future, not the guy that I'm relying on the exceptions of the world to prove could be my future. And so with that being the case, I would say that if the Saints do move on from Derek Carr, I would be looking to give Spencer Rattler a shot to lead the way. 6 foot, 211 pounds. He's a guy that's going to be considered undersized at his position.
Well, here's the problem with Rattler is that if you are Kellen Moore and the coaches, he's a guy who's a 5th-round pick who, let's just be generous and say he had some very up and down moments last season. He's not exactly a knockout, no doubt about it, rookie campaign, or not coming off of one. So if you're Kellen Moore and this front office, are you okay with going into the season with more than likely, I'll just say it, I don't think Spencer Rattler is one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the NFL. I don't think he's a starting quarterback just yet. Could he get there? Sure. But if you're Kellen Moore in that front office or that staff, are you okay with that? Are you okay with going into this with a guy who more than likely isn't a starter? And yeah, he could develop into one. Yeah, he's a pseudo project. But what would make them want to take on a project that isn't theirs? Like, they didn't draft Rattler. They didn't. So for them to be like, yeah, let's just develop and make this guy a project of ours. It's like, well, very rarely does that happen. Very rarely does an incoming staff take on the previous group's developmental players or projects.
Position, there's no.
We saw that with Justin Fields in Chicago. Justin Fields was there. New regime comes in. Fields wasn't part of their plan. They had no, that wasn't part of their vision. And then next thing you know, he's in Pittsburgh.
Doubt about that. 4.95 speed in terms of his 40-yard dash, but at 1.67 10-yard split. Not bad on the 10-yard split. Not too terribly dissimilar from Jalen Hurts, for instance, at 1.6. But I think the thing that he told me during the season that I brought to the show that I also wrote over at LouisianaSports.net.
Are we talking about 10-yard splits on the 40? Is that what we're talking about? I thought I blacked out for a second. I read it out for a second. All of a sudden, we're talking about Spencer Rattler's 10-yard split.
That is a big focus for him this offseason is speed, right? Training, building, all those other things, not having to come off of a draft process that didn't give him any time to be able to focus on the things that he needed to focus on, all those other things. I think it could be interesting to see what a Spencer Rattler could look like in a Kellen Moore offense that's going to build itself specifically to highlight the things that his players do well. And of course, that would bring a run game to help support the quarterback also. And so the way that I look at it when it comes to Spencer Rattler is that what he gives you are some of those kind of intangible things that you look for in a quarterback. I mean, the players love him. They like being around him. They like his leadership. They like his confidence. He's a good leader. He's a good communicator. It's all the stuff that doesn't show up.
Is he? We saw a 7-game sample from a 5th-round rookie. Like, is he this leader? Is he this whatever? Maybe. I like Spencer Rattler. If I was just telling somebody this, if I could wave a magic wand, I would make Spencer Rattler a 10-year Hall of Fame quarterback. I like the guy. I like how he plays. I like him in interviews. I like his moxie. I like what he's been through. If I could make someone a franchise quarterback, if I could make somebody, boom, you're rock and roll, give him all the talent in the world, it would be Spencer Rattler. I would love to see Spencer Rattler be a MVP level, Hall of Fame level type quarterback. And I'd be the happiest guy in the world if for the next 10 years he was the franchise guy. But he's far away from that right now. And a lot of what I'm hearing is a lot of praise heaped on Rattler when it seems like we're still talking in maybes. Maybe he can be this or maybe he can develop in that. And this is where you kind of have to remove yourself as a fan and look at this through the lens of Kellen Moore or look at this through the lens of an incoming coach. Kellen's not going to have the same viewpoint on Rattler like Ross is talking about here.
In the stat sheet. It's a really interesting thing because I've been arguing and having this argument amongst the Locked On NFL hosts, and I'm kind of that, the guy that takes out his sword and everybody's charging at him and stuff like that. And I'm having this conversation around the idea that Jalen Hurts should be amongst the elite quarterback conversation in the NFL. Is he Patrick Mahomes? Is he
No.
Is he Lamar Jackson? Is he Josh Allen? No. But is he Joe Burrow? Yeah, kind of.
I would have Hurts. This is again knee-jerk reaction situation. I'd have him probably first number that came to my head was 6th, maybe 5th, maybe somewhere in that world, 5th or 6th. I think sounds about right.
You know what I mean? And so the way that I look at it is those two, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, to me, both deserve to be in the elite conversation. If one doesn't, then the other doesn't. To me, those two are tied together. And so when I have those conversations, what I get all the time is, well, he's a great leader. He's super clutch and he shows up in the biggest games, but he's not an elite quarterback. What do you mean? All those things sound rather elite to me. You know what I mean? And so I think that we remove intangibles when it's convenient we remove intangibles to make an argument against what a quarterback can bring. And I think that the intangibles that Spencer Rattler brings are pretty good ones.
I mean, I think intangibles, and I've talked about this before, but I think intangibles, you can get really lost in intangibles. And if I was grading a player, I would almost remove all the intangibles. I would remove all of them because they're unquantifiable. They're very narrative driven. Intangibles are used to basically further a belief one way or the other. And like something like clutch, like this guy's the most clutch basketball player in the world. Well, that doesn't mean he's going to make every game-winning three. What does that even mean? And really, you should just take the clutch out and instead just replace it with his 3-point percentage or whatever. Like just replace it with that and use that number and grade him that way. Just like quarterbacks. Like just a lot of people got lost in the intangibles in the Super Bowl of Philly's better, roster's better, coach is better, talent's better, this is better, that is better, but it's Patrick Mahomes in a big game, he's not going to lose. And they rode that intangible, blasted right through all of the actual X's and O's, all of the actual numbers, all of the DVOA, all of the EPA, all that stuff, blasted right through that and said, yeah, Eagles are all these things, but Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Super Bowl, big game, can't lose, Taylor Swift's in the building, I'm betting on the Chiefs. And look what happened. All right, so I'm kind of in the camp of intangibles are closer to just like sparkly magic dust, and I just kind of take it out.
And so the physical traits, not too terribly dissimilar from a Super Bowl winning quarterback right now. The intangible traits, not too terribly dissimilar. Now, the next thing you got to do is make sure that you build a game plan that supports what it is that he does well on the field, right?
I mean, this is kind of crazy. Like the idea that the physical traits of Spencer Rattler and Jalen Hurts are similar because of their height and build in their 40 time or their 10-yard split. Like Jalen Hurts squats 600 pounds. Like we've seen him squat. We've seen him do all this stuff. If I was a betting man, I would guess Spencer Rattler doesn't squat 600 pounds. Like Spencer, just because their height weight is the same, and they're a couple of tenths of a second close in a 10-yard split, like they're not the same player physically. Like Rattler and Hurts are different physically. I mean, Justin Fields is 6'3", 240, like 6'3", 230. And I'm sure he's probably faster than both of them, right? And he's probably, I would guess he's kind of in the middle. I don't think Justin Fields is squatting 600 pounds either, but I would guess Fields is probably physically closer to Hurts than Rattler is, so Fields is probably in the middle of those two.
Now we're getting into not physical traits, not intangible traits, but what can you do on the football field in terms of producing, right?
That is a tangible trait.
Where do you really, where's your best throw, right? Are you excelling in the short and intermediate area, but not necessarily in the deep area? Do you have a good deep ball?
He's describing
Are you able to get the ball out with touch? Are you able to get the ball out quickly? All these other things. Those are the things that you kind of just have to figure out with a young quarterback like Spencer Rattler, who would look very different his second year than he looked in his first year. So you kind of have to learn all of those things. One of the best ways to learn all of those things, however, is to provide competition. I've been talking about for weeks now guys like Kyle McCord, guys like Jaxson Dart. I don't think that either should be drafted in the first round. I don't really know that a lot of quarterbacks should be drafted in the
So let's take a look at the draft board. So this is from Pro Football Focus. Now, the Combine's in a couple of weeks. This is going to change dramatically. All right, this is going to change big time. This is not going to be, the numbers that you're seeing now will move around. PFF's big board, Cam Ward is number one, Shador, then Dylan Gabriel, Jalen Milroe, Will Howard, Riley Leonard, Jaxson Dart, Quinn Ewers, Kyle McCord. If I had to guess, Kyle McCord and Jaxson Dart will jump up pretty significantly. If I had to guess, by the end of the day, it'll probably be Cam Ward, Jaxson Dart, Shador, Kyle McCord. Side note, I saw a former NFL scout on Twitter who does like his own website now. He was a former draft expert in the NFL. I think it was for the Bills, either the Bills or the Jets. He graded out Shador as an undrafted free agent. He didn't even have him graded out as should be drafted. That is nuts. That is absolutely crazy. I'm not saying crazy as far as like wrong or right, but it's just crazy to hear that coming out right now. But I mean, you're not going to take Cam 9th overall. You're not going to take Shador 9th overall. So the question is, do you look at Jaxson Dart in the second? Do you look at Kyle McCord in the second? Or maybe Dart or McCord falls to the third or fourth? Do you look at them there? Maybe. And that is interesting to draft a quarterback. Now, the question with that is, if you are planning on drafting a quarterback, it might make sense then to keep Derek Carr. Because if you're starting Rattler and you're let's just say wasting a high draft pick on a quarterback to directly compete with Rattler, one of the two will no longer be viable. You're either wasting the pick because Rattler is really good, or you're wasting a year because Rattler is not very good. And so at that point, if you're going to draft a quarterback, you probably have a relatively low grade on Rattler. So keep Carr, let Carr be the bridge, restructure Carr, let Carr be the bridge quarterback, draft your guy if you like. Again, we're a long way away from knowing how good these guys are. But if you like Jaxson Dart, if you like Kyle McCord's the guy I've heard is going to really, really jump up. But if you like Kyle McCord, then yeah, keep Carr, restructure him, draft McCord, let McCord sit for a year or two, and there you go. And before, I think it was right when Allen got fired, we talked about how Rattler and like Haener and people like that, like you can get caught up in the wheel, and you get caught up in like just the NFL wheel of you're in between coaches, you're in between visions, you're in between front offices, you're in between coordinators, and one coordinator or one coach's vision may kind of skip you, and to no fault of your own, you may just get jumped. Perfect example, if we restructure Derek Carr and we draft Kyle McCord, Spencer Rattler got jumped. And Spencer Rattler is no longer part of that future plan. Now he's been replaced with Kyle McCord being that future plan. So keep that in mind if you hear these rumors to the Saints. Like if you hear the Saints maybe drafting Jaxson Dart in the second, that kind of tells you, okay, well, Rattler probably isn't the future plan anymore. And Haener certainly isn't, right? So this is feasible. Like when you think about all the stuff we're talking about, and you think about the likelihood of what's going to happen, the likelihood of us releasing or trading Carr, but then signing Fields and also signing a Cooper Rush or whoever else, and then Fields is competing with, like, all of that sounds like a lot. And then you think, okay, well, what about restructure Carr, draft McCord? That sounds a little more likely, right? So it's such a unique puzzle. It really is. And there's no real wrong answer, and there's no real right answer. I mean, I thought about this all day. I thought about this for about 24 hours straight of like, what would I do? And then what do I think is the most possible? Because they're not always the same. And I'm still in between like 4 or 5 different options. I'm still in between. Yeah, I could definitely see us restructuring Carr and playing Carr, but I could also just as easily see us cutting Carr. And I could equally see us cutting him and eating the cap just as easy as I could see us cutting him with the post-June 1st designation and moving around that hit and deferring. You don't realize the cap savings or whatever until a certain date. And I can see like all this financial moving around. All of those scenarios are seemingly like on the table. Just like drafting a quarterback is on the table, I would say just as likely as signing a quarterback is on the table. So it's a fork in the road. It's more like a spork in the road. There's like 8 different tendrils that this thing could go through.
The first round at all in this quarterback class, but quarterback is always going to go higher than it needs to go. So we'll see what actually happens,
for sure,
especially after the combine, pro days, top 30 visits, team interviews, all those other things. That's all going to change everything in terms of draft stock, because then it's going to move from the scouts' hands to the coaches' hands. And when the coaches fall in love with the player, that's why players go in the first round that scouts have like day 2, day 3 grades on. The coaches tend to screw that up. So we'll have to see exactly what happens when it comes to all that. But if a guy like Jaxson Dart's available in the 3rd round, if a guy like Kyle McCord's available in the 4th or 5th round, I think you take a flyer on those guys if you've been able to address the major positions that you have to address. The Saints have the advantage of having 9 picks. I personally would avoid this year's draft class, but that's just me. What the New Orleans Saints will do, very different than what it is that Ross Jackson would do, because Ross Jackson is one mind when it comes to an NFL team. They have several people that are...
Pretend you aren't a Saints fan. Pretend you're... Or let's just pretend we're not talking about the Saints. Pretend that you heard that the Cleveland Browns. Pretend you heard the Cleveland Browns are deciding on starting their fifth round second year quarterback who had a below average year last year, who went 0-7 and all this other stuff. They're either between that or a fifth round rookie they've drafted this year. You'd be sitting here going, man, the Browns are about to suck. They're about to be terrible. They're about to be horrible. They're deciding between a fifth round rookie and a fifth round rookie that was 0-7 last year and this, and this. When you see it through the Saints lens, there's a lot of hopium and copium where it's like, oh no, this guy will be sweet. This guy will be awesome, and this guy will be awesome, and this guy will be awesome. So be careful. That's the thing that fans can do is they take relatively average players or performances and they fill it with hopium copium to where there can be this insane jump. There can be this insane leap forward. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think I'd be shocked if McCord or Dart fell that far, especially as much as we're hearing now. I mean, to me, it sounds like they may be closer to second, third round picks. And remember, last year, Ladd McConkey was, at this point, he was a fifth round pick graded out. And we kept saying, nah, he's going to go way higher. And we had him graded in the second round. And then he ends up, as draft day gets closer, he ends up having a first round grade. So remember, if you hear Kyle McCord's a fifth rounder right now, there's a chance that won't hold.
They're all kind of creating dissenting opinions that are making sure that they're bouncing and working off of one another, things like that. It's a much better process than just one guy with no one to argue with but himself. So it's a very different situation. But I think competition makes players better. Competition drives development. Competition drives improvement. And so if you're the New Orleans Saints, move.
But I don't know if you can. There's a timing too with competition. I don't know if an outright quarterback competition is exactly what you want, especially a competition between a second year player and a rookie. I don't know if that's exactly what you want or is what's needed for a first year head coach trying to implement his offense. It seems like that's too much unknown. Like Kellen Moore getting to training camp or whatever, and you're trying to implement your offense, and you're trying to implement all of this, you're trying to get everything ready, you're trying to judge who's good, who's going to play, all this stuff happening. But at the most important position, you've got a rookie and a second year player outright competing. That sounds kind of, I'm not exactly sure if that's what you want. The competition would be good if it was Derek Carr competing with Jaxson Dart. That's what we saw in Tampa years ago when Baker was competing with Kyle Trask. It wasn't Kyle Trask competing with a fifth round rookie. He had a veteran pushing him. And then we saw what happened with Baker. And it's crazy to think now, but that was the conversation in Tampa as Baker was brought in to compete with Trask. So I do think competition is fine if it's under the right timing and with the right players. I think for sure Carr competing with McCord or Carr competing with Rattler even would be fine. But I'm not so sure if two unproven young guys trying to learn a brand new system, competing, that seems like a lot of uncertainty with a 36-year-old coach trying to implement what he's got going on.
Move on from a veteran quarterback in Derek Carr, and you're going from proven to unproven, then you want to give unproven the best opportunity to prove themselves. And so you put unproven against unproven and see which one comes out proven. Does that make sense, right? You try to get these two.
No, it's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, it's exactly what I'm saying is what you'd be cautious about, you're trying to set the standard. You're trying to implement the offense with everyone else on the field, and you've got unproven versus unproven. And so everyone else on the field is looking around like, what exactly do we do? Who exactly are we following? What exactly is, there's no consistency if it's unproven versus unproven. So with an unproven head coach and an unproven / unseen system, we don't even know what the system's going to look like. If you told me you have unproven head coach with an unproven quarterback competing with another unproven quarterback in an unknown system trying to be implemented in the first year with a team full of unknown players, like, I don't know. It seems like a lot of unknown.
At each other's throats a little bit throughout training camp, mini camps, rookie mini camps, OTAs, all that other stuff. And then by the time that you walk out of that, one of them has proven something to you, the organization. And that's how they earn their opportunity to be a starter. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. When it comes to any of the quarterbacks in this year's draft, I'd probably take Spencer Rattler over all but maybe one of them. And so we'll see where things go when it comes to all of this. But if the Saints do indeed make the decision to move on from Derek Carr, which I'll tell you right now, I do not anticipate. Again, there's a difference between Ross Jackson's opinion and the decision that Ross Jackson would make and the decision that the New Orleans Saints could, should, and would make, right? That's going to be very different. So I don't anticipate New Orleans doing it. I'll be very surprised if they do, but I do think it's the right decision. But if they do move on from Derek Carr, I do think that Spencer Rattler has the intangibles, has the physical traits, and has the ability to produce on the field. I think we've seen a little bit of it already, that are at least worth investing in over the course of the offseason, driving competition, driving development, driving improvement, and giving him an opportunity, if he earns it, to have the shot to lead this team in 2025 and see where you get from there. Coming up.
As far as Carr, and let me preface this or preface it. I have no problem with Derek Carr, but I do think it's time for a new quarterback, a new vision, new identity. 33 years old, the team just feels like it's ready for new. Let's have the new. Let's the Super Bowl week stuff and all of that really kind of rubbed me the wrong way. The Darren Carr stuff rubbed me the wrong way. It's all just kind of like, man, I'm just over it. I'm honest. I mean, just being honest with y'all, I'm just kind of over it. Not, I don't hate the guy. I'm not rooting against him. Whatever. I'm not booing him or subtweeting him. It's just like, okay, this whole thing, this last couple of years, like, it's all just kind of played itself out. It's getting kind of tired. It's getting kind of whatever. With that being said, if Carr is brought back, I am forced to assume that it makes the most sense as far as the monies and as far as the direction of the team and the rebuild and all of that and what Kellen wants to do. If I hear that Carr is coming back, I'm not going to be sad. I'm not going to be happy. I'm just going to accept that this was the right decision for where this team is and what this team has to do. That's the only way you can look at it. So that's another very unique part of this, is we can sit here all day and say, well, Justin Fields could run the tush push, and Justin Fields could be like Jalen Hurts, and he could do this, and he's 25, and he can do that. Yeah, but Spencer Rattler's got leadership intangibles. Yeah, but Derek Carr's won, whatever, the 11th most games in NFL history. All that stuff is cool. All that has merit, and all that's fine. But if it doesn't add up on the balance sheet, if it doesn't add up in the back end, then it doesn't matter. So at a certain point, and I think the Saints know that, like, at a certain point, their conversation isn't even who's the better player or who can we win with or who can we build upon. It's more like, what do we financially have to do? What are the financial constraints and what can we feasibly do? What can we feasibly make happen? So it's a wild ride, though. I mean, it's crazy how many different ways this can go down. Just when you look at Derek Carr alone, the fact that he could be kept, restructured, traded, cut 2 different ways. So, I mean, like, just Carr alone, kept, restructured, cut June 1, cut post June 1. I'm missing one. Kept, restructured, cut, traded. That's it, 5. There's 5 different ways that they can deal with just Derek Carr. And that's not even counting, okay, well, then there's Spencer Rattler, and then there's drafted quarterback. Oh, there's 3 different quarterbacks you can draft. There's like 10 different options. Oh, sign a free agent. Here's the 3 free agents you could sign. There's like right now, I mean, I'm filming this on February 15th. Right now, February 15th, there's probably, realistically, there's probably anywhere between 15 and 20 different ways that they could go as far as who is the quarterback for the New Orleans Saints week 1 of next year. That is absolutely insane. That is the only person it can't be is Jake Haener. That's it. So, all right, let me know in the comments below what you think. What would you do? It's a very confusing situation, no doubt about it. But what would you do? And thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.